Good evening, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple minutes to let everyone log in so they can see and hear, and then we'll get started with our special guest, Chuck Tingle. Thank you so much for being here. While you're logging in, do go ahead. You can introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're listening in from tonight, and what you're hoping to learn. If you do have any direct questions for our special guests, you could use the Q&A box so we can go ahead and keep track of those. We'll wait just 30 more seconds because I still see people logging in. All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Good evening and welcome to the Milwaukee Public Library Book Chat. My name is Beth and I'm the adult librarian at the East Library. Joining me tonight is my awesome coworker, Tanya. They'll be chatting with you and making sure you have no tech questions or problems. So do reach out to Tanya if any of those apply. Feel free to use the chat box, as we said before. You can introduce yourself and talk amongst yourself. And then as we go through the evening, just sit back, relax. We'll be sending you follow-up notes with links to anything we talk about, any books, podcasts, movies, films, music we recommend. You can just relax. We'll send those to you in a couple days after our show. Tonight we'll be interviewing our special guest, Chuck Tingle. So let me introduce him to you. Chuck Tingle is a mysterious force of energy behind sunglasses and a pink mask. He is also an anonymous author of romance, horror, and fantasy. You were born in Home of Truth, Utah, and now split your time between Billings, Montana, and LA. You write to prove love is real because love is the most important tool we have when resisting the endless cosmic void. Not everything people say about Chuck is true, but the important parts are. Welcome to Chuck Tingle. We're so excited to have you.
Hello.
Let me tell you, when I told my coworkers at Milwaukee Public Library we were hosting you, like the love and the excitement was unreal. How does it make you feel?
Oh my gosh, it makes me feel very good. It is interesting, to be out here selling my wares, making my art, and to find that, Buckaroo community is one full of, I think, more than just your average artist and art appreciator. I feel like there is kind of more going on here, which always makes me feel very moved in a very deep and sincere way to feel put on a dang pink bag so you can't see my face, and then somehow connect even deeper than the things of anything that you would ever see on the outside. There is such an emotional connection. It's honestly sometimes it just bowls me the heck over.
Well, us too. So I just have to say, you've been quite a hero to me throughout my library career and to my friends and colleagues. So thank you so much again for being here. For those of us who are joining us that might not be as familiar, do you want to do a quick little extra introduction besides your bio? Tell us
Yes.
a little bit more about
Um,
yourself.
well, I started self-publishing about 10 years ago, erotica that most found to be strange and unusual about dinosaurs, big feet, living objects, and unicorns. And I think that over that time, that 10 years has pretty much been dedicated to me letting Buckaroos know that actually I'm not really joking about it, even though it does seem, I will say, absurd is an okay word because philosophically speaking, if you think about absurdism versus nihilism, what I do is actually, technically speaking, absurdist. That doesn't always have to mean comedy because I don't really think of it that way. But I just wrote a lot of erotica, and people started to read it. Some people found it funny. Some people found it sexy. I think however you react to it, honestly, as an artist, totally valid. Once I put it out into the world, it's not mine anymore. It belongs to everybody else, and they can enjoy it how they see fit. So I kind of became known for that. and also for talking about social issues a lot in my art. And then recently, I put out a novella called Straight, self-published that. That was queer horror, and then signed a deal with Horror Night to release full-length horror novels, and Count Damascus is the first of those, which just came out. I guess this year. Gosh, I was about to say last year, but it's only been out for dang 3 or 4 months, and is doing very well. So I guess that's my little dang intro.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've noticed you have been, touring all over. I saw you were at Comic-Con, lots of, virtual interviews, in-person interviews. Have you had like a favorite place that you've gotten to visit that you didn't get to go before?
Oh, interesting. Well, I always, I mean, Zoom is fine as we all. I mean, we're on it right now. This is great.
Hmm.
There is an energy, I think, when I get in a room of the Buckaroos. So my book tours get a little wild. I think that most bookstores aren't used to that kind of action when an author shows up. They're kind of used to sitting at the desk and signing some books and maybe a soft spoken talk. And I generally am climbing on the shelves and getting a little riled up.
Love
So
it.
that is very enjoyable, very cathartic for me. I kind of think it sounds strange because I'm on autism spectrum, so I have to not if when you are autistic or any other kind of neurodivergent. I think neurodivergent buckaroos will know what I'm saying is you kind of have to put in an effort to separate, well, what is my neurodivergence and what is my personality.
Mhm.
They are very intertwined, and some would say, well, they're the same thing, or there's all kinds of philosophical ways to address that. But part of, I think, my release, which is sometimes through stimming, but I think part of my release is actually live performance. I
Okay.
very rarely feel as rested and complete and like everything has fallen into place than after I get home from like a dang book tour show or any kind of show where I feel all buckaroos, and we all interact and create that energy. So, strangely, I think that's maybe a kind of a relaxation stim for me, but that's just kind of my own personal journey to work out. I'm not sure. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, how exciting to be in front of, people that have read and loved your book and getting to sign them. Did your hand get tired? I've heard people often struggle with the
Oh,
signing
yes.
after a while.
Well, you know what? I have this, the bag is very hot, but I have a rule about my own gratitude, about taking moments to appreciate where I am and what I have and how cosmically lucky I am to even be born in the first place with all this infinite swirling mess. A 1 in 100 billion chance for me to be here, and not only here, but be lucky enough to create art and have others enjoy it. So I have a rule. It's in our rider when we visit bookstores, that they're not allowed to close until I have signed the whole line. Which sometimes on the book tour was 2.5 or 3 hours. Um, but it's very important to me that everyone who comes, I have to be able to at least, if they're going to wait for me, then I have to sign for them. So yes, it does hurt and it cramps, but I kind of just look at it like a sort of athletic event. If there's
Hmm.
dang football players running around and the other things like that, I can sign a bunch of dang books and make a Buckaroo's Day who waited in line for 3 hours.
I, as someone who has been to author events, I appreciate that very much because, it's really special when you get to meet one of your faves and have them sign your book. So that's lovely.
Oh
And
yes,
I learned
I
to
wouldn't.
do this exercise because my wrist
Oh,
sometimes.
that's very good. I don't. Well, so that's interestingly similar. Speaking of autism, to my
Hmm.
STEM
Okay.
in in Camp Damascus, Rose has a counting stim on her fingers. That
Hmm.
is actually my stim I've had since I was younger. It's just a pattern of 5 4 3 2 1 4 3 2 and 3 2 1 2 and 1, and then I do different variations of that pattern. But I should do that slower in
Hmm.
silence and maybe stretch those dang fingers out.
Yes. Yes. I get a little tendonitis from like using a computer too much. So that was one that they taught me to just stretch. So that'll be excellent for you.
Yes.
Um, so I was really lucky. I got an early copy of
Oh,
Camp
neat.
Damascus. So
Hold
I
on to
was,
that one. That's great.
yes, I did write in it because that's what I do with my paper copies because they're mine. And I highlighted a bunch of stuff in green. I don't know why green, but that was what spoke to me. So I
That's
got to read
kind
it
of a
pretty
camp.
early and it
That's a
was
camp
just special.
color.
I was like, oh, like the bandana. Didn't you have special bandanas made for the
Yes, but that
pre-order?
that was yellow, which there
Oh,
was a
yeah.
lot of debate. There was a lot of debate with that because I said, well, the camp colors are actually green and white, and then we thought, well, we can leave it up to imagination. It's okay if the bandana is yellow. It says "burn it down" on it. Make it yellow.
That was awesome. Those were really cool. That's really cool swag. So I got to read it pretty early, and then I was just yelling about it to all my coworkers who I made them read it too, and I shared my copy around. And for
Oh, thank
those,
you.
yeah, and then for those who haven't read it yet, what is the quick like elevator pitch for Camp Damascus specifically?
Camp Damascus is a horror about a autistic girl named Rose in a small town that the community is built around a camp, a conversion therapy camp called Camp Damascus, that has 100% success rate with their unique methods. And things start to unravel as you realize that maybe their 100% success rate has a few qualifiers.
Hmm. Sure does. I was really scared reading this in like the best horror reader way. And like I am 99% a romance reader, which is how I discovered you essentially. And like I'm HEA all the way. And I love that this too worked with my romance reader heart. So
Oh,
thank you
that's
for
great.
that.
Yes, well, there is a relationship core to this story. I
Hmm.
didn't think about it necessarily because Camp Damascus and the next novel of my Nightfire contract, called Bury Your Gaze, I actually wrote them about the same time.
Okay.
The Bury Your Gaze has been finished for a long time, and I thought, well, which one should come out first? That was kind of a thought in my head. And what I do like about Camp Damascus is that there is definitely for buckaroos who know me from romance, there is a romance thread through it. So I
Hmm.
do think it is a good first one. Bury Your Gaze actually, it's funny. I just said all that, and I think, well, Bury Your Gaze has romance too. But I would say that Bury Your Gaze is not the romance. I don't think is necessarily like a plot. Oh, it is a plot.
Hmm.
Dang it! Now I realize that they both have important romance plot points. So actually, never mind. Scratch all that. The romance is important in both of them, but I guess maybe it's a little more important in Camp Damascus.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for including that and it made it an easy sell for me to be like, are you horror curious, but usually read romance? Like this is the book for you? And I love that so much. Um, so Tanya and I were talking about the book before tonight and going through some of our thoughts and something I've read it twice now. I read it when I got my copy and then I read it quick before tonight because I needed to refresh because it had been a little minute. And I totally missed, even though it's right laid out, the Peter Pan like allusions and references. Can you like touch on that for,
Yes.
us?
Well, geez, I don't know how to. there's a lot about this book, and interesting, I think the way that I write horror
Mhm.
in general, that because I write first person present, inevitably they're always bathed in mystery. It's kind of actually nice. It's almost accidental, but it makes it so there's a lot of twists and turns because you're generally learning with the kind of personal narrator. Whereas, third person, you can kind of jump around and you're kind of this bird's eye view of everything. This, you're getting doled out the information slowly. So they're always mystery. And it makes me worry about how much I can tell if buckaroos
Mhm.
have not read it. And generally with my horror, you can't say that much because it's there's so much mystery involved.
Mhm.
I will say, spoilers for this answer if anyone has not read Camp Damascus yet, and I will try to not talk about it too in depth. But yes, the Peter Pan illusion has to do with the fact that the book is works in three layers because I think the moral of the story is about how you can take a book, in this one the Bible, and kind of interpret it any way that you like. And so I thought, what a great way to show that than to really thematically create layers of the actual book that you're reading. So I see it as the literal layer, the folklore layer or fairy tale layer, and the biblical layer. And there's basically three ways to read it. I think, you pick it up and you read the literal layer first. And
Mhm.
next would be the kind of the fairy tale layer, which is
Mhm.
Peter Pan. Rose Darling is the main character. She's from Neverton, and that obviously correlates to Never Neverland. But the allegory extends to pretty much every character of the book has a different thing and a connection to Peter Pan, and it's not a retelling in any way. It is
Mhm.
more like a what it should have been because the original Peter Pan, Peter is not that good of a guy in the not Disney one. It is kind of implied that he is murdering the Lost Boys and some kind of dastardly things. Um, and so in this story, the pastor is named Pete or Peter. Pete Bend, Pastor Bend, and Bend is another word for hook. So it's kind of a cross between Captain Hook and Peter Pan. I can say, Saul is another character, is represents the Lost Boys, and Willow represents the crocodile. And there's a lot of things to do with if you go back and look. I think Willow's my favorite in that sense, in that there's a lot of relationship to nature where you can tell kind of animalistic, but there's also time and truth. And the reason it's time is because the crocodile has the clock. So she has a camera and she takes photos that kind of have a steady rhythm when she takes them, and you know that she's cruising around with her camera clock ticking. And a few other things. Her coffee cup has a crocodile on it, and she is met in a small town next to Neverton called Lebka Rock, which, if you actually translate that, that's Skull Rock, which is the little island off of Neverton. So there's so much allegory weaving through that layer. It's very fun to pull apart. And the reason that I did that was because I kind of noticed that religious conservatives have this thing, especially when it comes to sexuality, of trying to make it seem like um, these things that exist uh, don't exist. And really, what that does is just infantilizes a community because, queer people are real. If you try to, I guess, not have someone read a queer book, for instance, all that's going to do is make them ignorant to the fact that this world has queer people in it. You're not actually doing anything. And I find that it's kind of like a keeping the youth children forever. So that's
Mhm.
where the Never Neverland kind of idea comes from, is within this community in Neverton, all of the kids are kept young forever. So I show that through the Peter Pan allegory. Rose, the main character, and her friends kind of talk like teenagers, but she's actually 20. And then I also did something where I knew that there was a way I could write this and plot this that would feel kind of YA, but I also knew
Mhm.
that the violence and things in it was adult. So I kind of wanted to write it in a sort of, well, is this a child or is this adult? Is this, you know, like, why are we existing in this state of kind of the middle ground? Which, you know, at that age when you're graduating high school, I think everyone feels that already. And if you're in this
Mhm.
conservative community oppressing your queer urges and pretending that sexuality doesn't exist when you're 20 years old, you're going to feel that awkwardness. So it's kind of a pretty experimental book in all those
Mhm.
ways. Sorry, that was probably the most rambling answer I've ever given.
No, that
No,
was
it was
perfect. Yeah. Go ahead.
awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, that I mean, you probably saw my reaction to Willow being the crocodile because that is so wow. I was talking to a friend of mine last night because they're really very familiar with the text of Peter Pan, and I was like, I'm picking up on some things, but like you know more things, and they haven't read your book yet, but I was like, and I'm terrible at giving summaries. So I'm like, here's kind of the stuff that's happening. And, but, you know, being aware that there's parts where I'm like, there's probably illusions happening that I'm not even catching and like sharing to make these connections. And so it was
Yes.
so lovely to hear you kind of break those down, and especially talking about like how it's like these sort of like the three layers, and I think you braid them together so beautifully in the story. Like
Mhm.
it's very seamless, and the pattern you have, especially like the tension between the biblical and the sort of folklore fairy tale, especially hopefully it's not too much of a spoiler to like mention it, but like as Rose starts to build her own scriptures,
Mhm.
Oh, yes.
like fantastic. And but yes, it's just so wonderful to hear some of those like intentional what like not quite one-to-ones, but like who like which sort of characters you were having in mind, because that was part of my friend and I's conversation last night, was just like, and we were kind of talking about like, you know, I was like, Rose isn't Peter, and I have a personal thought about who I like, how I think of Rose within the framework of like the Peter Pan stuff, but I don't need to get into that. So it's just so lovely to like hear
That's
that.
great. Well, I like that. I mean, that's the fun thing about allegory is
Mhm.
it's none of it is right or wrong. It kind of, if you can let it kind of flow over it and through it. I think that a lot of it too is if you're really I don't know, it kind of always works out for me where I start to create these webs. And then I think your heart and your mind, when it comes to art, your art knows kind of before you do a lot of the time. And so once it got so complex, I started to realize all these really fascinating things. Like there are three kind of hero characters. Rose is the main character, but there are kind of three main characters. And I divided it into these three layers. And then later I realized, oh, each layer is actually kind of a different, it kind of changes the main character in a strange way. I
Mhm.
think the literal layer is Rose's layer. We start with her. She drives that narrative. If you go to the Peter Pan layer, another spoiler, everyone. Willow kind of becomes I'd say main character, but almost more the protagonist because as the crocodile is the one that eats Captain Hook at the end, and there's a moment where Rose can have this kind of heroic moment. She has plenty of them, but she doesn't succeed, and then instantly Willow steps up and does it, and kind of creates a reaction that causes the end of the camp. Um, and that was literally because that is how the crocodile does it in Peter Pan. So that's kind of Willism and Saul. The most famous story of Damascus in the Bible is Saul's conversion on the road to Damascus, where Saul is blinded. And in this, in the Bible story, Saul is blinded in this memory erased, which is kind of a mental, spiritual blinding. And so there's all this stuff with Saul and the biblical layer. And so I didn't really even plan that. But when I look at it now, I think, oh, it's kind of fascinating. There's all these kind of triplets of things that you can see in the book. That's really, I don't know, it's fun for me. I know some buckaroos find it to be very high school senior English class to have everything be an allegory, but I find that stuff kind of fun.
I eat that up. And it makes, the book utterly rereadable over and over. I know I'm definitely knowing that Mara Wilson is the audiobook narrator. I'm going to listen to it at some point too, because she's just
Yeah.
fantastic. Were you involved in that process at all, like choosing, or I know you're a big fan of
Yes.
audiobooks, so
Well, yes, audiobooks are I don't really read off a page much. I don't know if speaking of personality or autism, I don't know which one it is, but I can't focus on reading a book, but I love audiobooks. So yeah, I want it to be good. Mara is a bud of mine. We have been buds for a pretty dang long time. We asked her to do a couple of live shows that I've done when I kind of did a live podcast shows, and then she was on a podcast I did with Bakrut at Night Vale, which is a podcast, and we did kind of a collaborative thing, and she did an episode of that. So we've been buds for a pretty long time, and honestly, she was the first person I thought of. Even when writing this, I was like, "Oh, we got to see if Mara wants to do this," because she's just so great, and honestly, one of the kindest and so generous with her time. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been a small timer, and in my head, I'm still a small timer, but I also know that I'm becoming more big timer. But ever since the old days, Mara has been very generous with her time. So she's just amazing. And as far as the process, once that happened, I do have a strange thing with my art. I think it'll be this way forever. I can't listen to audiobooks of my work. I don't know what it is. It frightens me. It's very hard for me. So I stay away from actually listening, but I know that everyone does a good job. It was that way with Straight and with Camp Damascus, and also I have audiobooks of Tinglers, and I just can't do it. I don't know why. It makes me feel strange. But yes.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of your Tinglers are now on audio, which was information new to me today. I was very excited about that. So
Yes.
everyone go check it out.
I'm surprised they're dang allowed on Audible, but they
Hey, we'll
are.
take it. I love it. And a lot of them are bundled together too, which is neat, for people.
Yes.
Get the bang out of your credit. Or I'm gonna start looking and seeing if we have them on our digital audiobook platforms for the library, because we love hoopla around here. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I understand you when you're saying like listening to your own work back. That I can imagine it's like hearing your own voice and somebody else's voice, and I have a hard
Well,
enough
I'm
time
always
watching back my YouTube. I don't like to do.
yes. I will say that the tidbits that I hear, I'm always pleasantly surprised, and I think, oh, that's actually pretty dang good.
Mhm.
I have nothing to be afraid of.
Mhm.
I think that eventually I will cross that bridge, but it gives me a sort of a nervous fear, like there's going to be some mistake or something. I don't know. I just can't do it.
You're all good.
Yeah,
Let's
it's weird.
see. Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say it's weird to have your brain outside your body, so I get that.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm. So, Camp Damascus just came out. What is the next on your docket? What's in the cooker?
Oh, okay. Well, Bury Your Gaze is going to come out next summer, and I'm
Okay.
at one of those strange points where everyone's getting ready to uh, promote it and make a big deal about it. So I'm told to say, "Chuck, don't talk about it too much. We're gonna have a big thing." But I'm going to say this week there will be a lot more information about it. I can say that, I think. I don't know if I can say that, but I just did. Yeah, so Buried Days is coming out in it's another horror story, and I am very, very excited about it. I think it's a very different tone from Camp Damascus. Well, not very different tone. It's horror, but there's just, I think it will be very interesting. I kind of feel like as an artist, you kind of create pieces that set like points of triangulation, and then everything you create kind of has your vibe, and it lands within these triangles. And if you were going to look at the horror Tingleverse, even the Tingleverse, you got Tinglers over here, you got Camp Damascus over here, then you got Straight on these places, and I think that Bury Your Gaze is going to be another one of those triangle points. I think tonally it functions as horror in a very traditional horror sense. I think it might be even more, I say, scarier and kind of more difficult for buckaroos to get through than Camp Damascus in the horror sense. And yet at the same time, pretty, I would say, funny, which I don't try to do very often, but very funny. So it functions as both a horror thing and the funny thing without being a comedy. What I would compare it to, not in plot or anything, but tone, is something like Scream.
Okay.
Or even maybe Cabin in the Woods, where it is reflective of the genre while still being a serviceable version of the genre that it's reflecting, if that makes sense.
It really does. It really
Yes.
does. When I was preparing for this, I noticed that you talked about your writing process, and I found it really fascinating that you like to go on these long trots in the morning. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yes, I generally, my process is, because I write a lot. I looked on my Goodreads today, and it said 439 published works. So that's pretty wild. I think some of those are bundles, but individual stories is probably around 350, which is still nothing to shake a dang stick at. So, my process really is, when I start the day, sometimes even well before the dang sun comes up, I like to go on a pretty long walk up the hill, do my trot, which is a little dang mosey up into the wilderness. And then that's why I think a lot, either listening to a dang podcast or music or audiobook, and sometimes nothing at all. And that is where I do most of my writing. If I am working on a dang horror novel, and I have no ideas, that's where my ideas kind of spill around and run into each other. I think I'm a message-based writer, which is pretty rare, which is I have to have an idea that I think is clever, but it also has to collide with a personal thing that I want to say or that I want to give the audience. And I won't really write it if I don't have something to give. And once that occurs, then I can start developing a plot, and I do it all in my head on these walks for about 2 or 3 months. And then once I get it to the point where I could tell it, and it kind of campfire style, like if we were to sit at a campfire and I'd say, "You want to hear a story? I'm going to tell you," and I could tell it from beginning to end perfectly. In my head, I know it that well, every kind of twist and turn. Once it's there, then it's time for me to sit down and write. And when I actually sit down to write it, it only takes, I'd say, 3 or 4 weeks to write a whole novel. But it's because at that point, it's just, I already know the whole story. It just kind of flows out of me. I just write it all. So all the organizing and the writing part is done without pen or paper or anything. It's just in my head for about 2 or 3 months.
That's amazing. Like, truly, that's very cool. I love that. And then when you're doing your writing, is it typing, or do you ever write longhand, or?
Oh no, it's just right into the dang dang word processor.
Beautiful.
Yes, I think the longhand that might help. Although I'm signing so many dang book plates these days, I don't know if I can take the extra strain. But I do love my little dang word processor. I do.
That's good. It's a good tool to have. Um, let me see here. So not only do you write novels and Tanglers, I'm also familiar with your role-playing books. You have a role-playing game. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think
Oh yes, I'm a
librarians and gamers kind of go hand
That
in
is
hand.
true. I throughout my dang career, I have always I have this to hide my face. There's certain things that I do to protect my privacy. And a lot of buckaroos at first thought, oh well, Chuck's just lying and making all this up. And I am not actually. I think the biggest wildest thing about me is that I'm actually kind of telling the truth about who I am and what my purpose is. And it basically took a decade for anyone to really didn't believe it, but here we are now. And I think that the thing that can be confusing is that I still want to hide things about myself and protect my privacy. So the example I give is if I say or I post online, oh, I pet a cat today. I might have pet a dog, but in general, these are either allegories or metaphors or different things for something that I'm actually feeling and going through. And so I used to hide way more behind these layers. And I think over time, part of my artistic journey as a creator has been to strip these layers away. Even physically, if you look, I used to wear a big gi so you couldn't even see my body. And I decided on this book tour, okay, I'm going to strip away even more and allow myself to become more of myself as I learn about myself. I could talk about this all day. It kind of has to do with my autism, my bisexuality, even my gender. These are things that I have kind of slowly learned about myself. So I've kind of revealed more of myself. That has a very long preamble to say I didn't talk about my love of role playing games in the early days because I didn't want to talk a lot about myself in ways that weren't veiled in metaphor. Recently, and ever since I published that game, I'm okay with saying that yes, Chuck is actually very well versed on game name of Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition. In fact, I for many years was a dungeon master and still occasionally play Second Edition Dungeons and Dragons. And tried fifth edition, but did not like it as much, and then went back to second edition. So I'm just living in the late 70s with that one. But what I like about second edition is the pen and paper on the table, the physicality of it, the smell of a dang spilled bong water on your used player's handbook from the secondhand store. So to kind of get that, I wanted to write a role playing in this pretty much a Tingleverse version of Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition, very similar. And then I chose to only release it in paperback, actual physical books. I could have done online, but I thought I just as a personal as a something about this art, I just thought I want this to only be played with a book because that's just where I get my joy. So that is kind of why I put it out like that. But it was very fun and really also hurts your brain trying to design a game with all that math.
I give you all the credit. My friends purchased the book and we've had some fun evenings, looking through
Yes,
it and just enjoying it overall because you come up a lot in our fireside chats. We talk about what your new Tingler, the latest
I'm honored.
cover,
Honored.
and I just want to shout out to my friends Jess and Nick, who were like my pandemic pals, and they were my pals that I talked about with you
Hello, Jess
a
and
lot.
Nick. I will shout them out. Hello. Love is real.
Yeah, love is real. Yeah, they also wanted me to ask about your book covers because I love them so much, especially your Tingler ones. Do you create those? Are you in
Oh
Photoshop
yes,
or
I sure am. I learned it myself, and I make all those dang tinglers. I think it's very fun. I'm pretty when it comes to art, I have always been more fascinated with kind of the way art in a medium is related to what's outside it, and
Mhm.
philosophically, I personally don't think that there's a boundary between the two. I never have. I guess you could call everything that I do Dadaist in that way. I do think that it's not just the book, but it's the bud who gave you the book, or how you found it, or the author themselves, how they present themselves. It's all interconnected to me. So yes, I have always really cared about what the covers look like, and just kind of every element of everything that I do. And so that kind of just meant making the covers myself.
How far out do you, because those come out pretty frequently and they're very topical. So what's like a normal schedule for you for something like a Tingler?
Oh, well, that's it kind of depends. So I am always, now that I'm doing horror novels and tinglers, uh, I kind of have to not only write all the time, but write two different ways.
Hmm.
And it's very hard for me to jump between projects. I get very hyper focused on things. So I just kind of plow through them. But it's also all that I do. This is, my main job. So I guess technically it doesn't feel like it, but I just am writing all the time. So I would say, I already talked about my novel technique. When it comes to a tingler, if an idea comes up, if there's something in the news that I think, oh, that's interesting, I have an opinion on that. Like I said, I'm very message based. If I think I have something that I can share about this and add to it, I love that. I guess I have, I don't know other authors that do this. I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but it seems like I have created a way similar to the way, a magazine or print newspaper used to function, where you have this idea in the news, you synthesize it for your opinion, your feelings on it, how you want to artistically process it, and then I put it out into the world. And that takes me about 24 hours.
Okay.
Uh, so if a news item happens, I would say I write the book in about 5 hours, and
Mhm.
I make the cover in about an hour, and then generally it's nighttime, so I publish it on Amazon, and then the next morning it will come out. The majority of the time, but everyone says, Chuck, you write so fast. Majority of that time is waiting for dang Amazon self-publishing to process what I'm doing. I gotta, they can't really keep up with me. But it's so funny because I saw there was this disparaging 1-star review of a Tingler one time, and um, it said something is so dang funny. Oh, you can tell the author just saw this in the news and then thought, oh well, I gotta tell everyone what I think about this, and it blew my mind, and I thought,
Yes.
what think that creation and art is. And I thought that was so dang funny. So that 1-star review is kind of my flag that I wave proudly to say, yes, I kind of just synthesize a current event of how it makes me feel, and then kind of put it out there, and my backers seem to enjoy it.
Hmm. I think my all-time favorite was the non-denominational Starbucks cup. So thank you for
Oh
that one.
wow, that's a classic.
Yeah.
That's a classic. I'm actually kind of reapproaching that in
Ooh.
preparation for the holidays,
Hmm.
because I have never done a holiday bundle, and I
Oh,
think
hmm.
if it all goes well this year, I have enough stories that I think I'm going to do a gay bundle and a bisexual bundle probably at the same time, of all holiday stories, so you can get either one or both. that's the plan right now. But I'm also releasing horror novels, so we'll see. But I was thinking about holiday coffee cup story because that will obviously be in the bundle. That's a dang Christmas greatest hits.
It sure is. I loved it. I just remember laughing, and then I read it and I was like, oh, this is just so good. So everyone go check that one out right away. You know what I mean? So I want to get to some of our audience members' questions because we have some. And then I know Tanya and I both picked a couple of recommendations for books and podcasts. So why don't we quick run through that, and then we'll get to our audience questions, and then we'll wrap up and let you get on with your evening so you have more time to get Amazon going for you.
Yes.
All right, hold on one second. I'm going to share my screen. Where did it go? I'm going to start the slideshow. This is always fun for me here when I'm trying to. Okay, that's what I want to share. Bear with me, everybody.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah.
What a wonderful presentation.
Yes, we wanted to show your covers too. So there's you. And then oh, one further thing I wanted to pull up was you had a couple like references to art, and I just wanted to share with everyone this Albrecht Dürer painting, which is referenced in the book.
Yes.
And had you seen this previously, either in real
well,
life
you know
or
what? No, I hadn't. And I thought it was, that's one of those things, like I was saying, sometimes the art knows before you do. I, was going deep into kind of biblical lore, and I will say with Camp Damascus, if anyone hasn't read it, there's a lot of reference to sort of alternate historical texts that have to do with the Bible, but they're all real texts, which I think is pretty fascinating. There's kind of a conspiracy theory, I guess, that is kind of created within the pages of Camp Damascus, and each one of those pieces is a real thing, including this painting, which a lot of, or I guess it's a drawing, but a lot don't realize that down in the corner, I guess you can see on the bottom right, there was a teeny little mayfly there, and no one knows why the heck it is there. It's just this very strange thing. And if you read Camp Damascus, you think, oh, well, I think I know why it's there.
I was like, oh yeah, because that was a very visceral part of the book, that mayfly. So everyone can be sure to read it. So yeah, that's amazing. So I had to make sure we showed the paint or the drawing.
Yeah, the actual drawing.
Etching. Okay.
Etching. There you go.
Very cool. All right. And then here's just 3 of Chuck's books. So We Had Straight in the library. It looks like somebody checked it out and didn't return it because I tried to get it. I'm like, I hope you enjoy your book.
They liked it too much.
Yep, they wanted to keep it. And then there's Camp Damascus with some of those mayflies, like in the painting. And then I'm very excited to see the cover for Bury Your Gaze when you have it. So we'll stay tuned. And you said that is coming out next year in 2024 in the summer.
July, yes. And also, Buckaroos are interested. Pre-orders are a very big deal for authors. I did not, when I got into traditional publishing, I really did not realize it. But if you appreciate what you have heard and you like Chuck and want to support, honestly, pre-ordering a new book is just about the most direct way that you can support an author. And if you're tight on cash, also requesting it from your library is kind of the other way. I could do them both, but
yeah, do them both. Tanya or I are happy to facilitate that for anyone who is listening in. Very easy to do.
Yeah, you can recommend a purchase through the mpl.org website, or you can talk to a reference staff person and be like, hey, I would love to see this on your shelf. And we'll be like, we're going to make that happen. Or we'll try. Yep.
Or if you use the ebook platform Libby, you can recommend a purchase through that as well. So all sorts of ways to help out Chuck. All right. And then Tanya wanted to talk about just a quick few horror movies and podcasts that they were thinking about while reading Camp Damascus. So go ahead, Tanya.
Yes, okay, I will be as concise as possible. So I definitely, something Beth and I discussed was how wonderfully cinematic Camp Damascus is. Like, it's so easy to visualize, and there were definitely certain moments in like imagery and themes that immediately brought up movies I've seen or just am very familiar with. So I wanted to say recommendations for people. It Follows is a horror movie that also is a story about a um, girl being tied to a unrelenting destructive force against her will due to the nature of her sexuality. It's one of my favorite horror movies, and I am kind of a scaredy cat. So when watching this movie for the first time, it was a movie where I thought, like, oh my gosh, this is how I want to be scared. And it's fantastic. There are copies in the library. You can check them out that way. There are certain scenes, moving on to the next recommendation, there are certain scenes described in the book that almost immediately, without fail, conjured up visuals from the movie Hellraiser. So again, another horror movie. It is very explicit. So caution for those who need it. But absolutely, I feel like, and I know in certain interviews you've mentioned Hellraiser as like some of that kind of like horror
Oh yes,
zhuzh. And it
these are all great choices. Yes.
and that, I think that came through like so perfectly, the descriptions of like these scenes that kind of get patched through from the hell dimension, if you will. And if you're not a horror person and you really don't want to be too stressed out, I absolutely recommend But I'm a Cheerleader. It is also a movie about like kind of a conversion camp type situation, but and also with a protagonist who does not see herself as a queer person in the beginning. It's something that all of the people around her are sort of seeing about her. And it is, despite it being about a conversion camp, it's heavy on the camp and not too bad about the conversion. It's a phenomenon. It's like a structured text from my childhood that I just really love. And then super quick, other things like queerness and horror and the relationship, the like foundational relationship of that is something that I'm very fascinated by, despite being a scaredy cat. And so I wanted to give a quick recommendation of a recent episode of this fantastic podcast called American Hysteria. And they were doing a series of episodes about the history of drag, and they specifically had this episode about the killer crossdresser, or the murderous man in a dress trope that is very common throughout horror. And the guests were this wife duo, BJ and Harmony Colangelo. They're fantastic horror scholars. It is an absolutely like funny, loving, smart conversation about the ties between horror, queerness, and especially the notion of like transness and how that gets used in the tropes of horror. And then I personally really loved that Saul is a character who listens to grindcore, and even just by the description of what Rose was hearing when she first approached his garage, I almost knew right away what he was listening to. So I really love hardcore. And although this is not a Christian grindcore band, I did want to make sure to recommend, if anyone has any interest in grindcore, thrash, or hardcore, this great band called Here's Collective. It is a trans fronted hardcore band, a major it's just a major thing in the queercore scene, and absolutely recommend it if you love songs that are 50 seconds or less.
Perfect. All
Heck
right.
yes.
All right, I just had a few book recommendations. So let me just pull up my notes here. I have to do it on my phone because I can't have my notes up when I have my slides up. Um, so I read Plain Red Heroines, which is about a group of students in a New England boarding school. It takes place in two different times, the past and the present. The present is about a group that is trying to make a film about some bad happenings that happened at this school. It features beautiful women and some smooching and some murdering. And it's creepy, and there's a great map in the front of the book, which I always appreciate. It Came from the Closet is 25 narrative essays written by contemporary queer writers, and it's talking about horror, film, and queerness for movies like Hitchcock films or Halloween. So if you just want something to kind of dabble into or to discover some new to you writers, this is a really great collection. House of Hunger is next up on my reading list. It's about a young girl who is conscripted to give blood to some vampires, and it sounds pretty creepy. And if you like the Year of the Witching, this is a good one for you. And then I have been too much of a fraidy cat to read The Cabin at the End of the World, but my coworkers all love it, and it's about a couple, two men who are married and they're raising their young daughter, and they go to this cabin and scary, scary things happen to them. And it's, I think, a movie, or it's soon to be a show. So very excited about that, but I think I'm going to try to be brave finally and give that a shot. And then just before I close the slides, I just want to shout out our next book chat, which will be with author Felicia Grossman. We'll be talking about her new book, Marry Me by Midnight, on November 13th. We'll include a registration link in our follow-up email. All right. Share, stop share. Okay, so why don't we do a couple questions and then we'll wrap up and we
Yes.
can all have a great evening. Okay, so Tanya, did you want to go ahead and read any of those that you were keeping track of?
Yes, I did. There was one that had shown up in the chat. And apologies to anyone if I don't get your names right, but I do want to honor those who asked them as best as I can. So Janelle A had asked early on, they would love to know if Chuck has any favorite romance authors.
Oh wow. Yeah, you know what's interesting? First of all, I do not read very much. My art, I know you're not supposed to say that, especially at a dang library, although I will say libraries have great selections of film and music. And so, Bakaru Shiraz, remember that. Most of my inspiration comes from film and music and fine arts. I have sometimes said I have the two Andys and the two Davids are my biggest inspiration, which is Andy Kaufman, Andy Warhol, David Byrne, and David Lynch. Those are some of my biggest inspirations, and none of them are necessarily known as writers. But as far as romance goes, who I really enjoy is TJ Klune. And the way that I really found out about him was he wrote a book long ago, basically about me. It is about an author or a man who is secretly writing dinosaur erotica, and kind of a romance develops between him and someone else. And I'm thanked in the foreword. And I heard about this and I thought, oh, what a treat. So I got it. I got it online, and book came to my house, and I read it, and I enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm a big fan. So that's what I'm going to say for that.
Love that.
Fantastic. I also just want to say you give a lot of David and Andy energy. So how wonderful.
Yes.
Nothing like making a career out of your stems. And then some of the questions that came up in the Q&A, I there are some that were asked, but I feel like they did kind of get answered in the conversation we were having. So if I don't directly ask it, no offense to
Sure.
anybody, I just hope they feel that it was answered. Someone did ask, Amira B was wondering if you had ever personally experienced something like a conversion camp, or
Yes.
if that's not too personal
Oh,
to
that's fine.
discuss.
I will say flat out. If anyone ever comes to one of my events or sees me and wants to ask a question, I very honestly have no limits as far as any questions that can be asked. So that is very kind of you to say, but it's fine. Yes, I can see that in the little thing. No, so personally, I have been basically agnostic pretty much my whole life, and it is touching how many resonate with Camp Damascus and say, "Oh, Chuck must have experienced this." I actually really did not. A lot of what I drew from was, part of my life, a big part of my life, was traveling around the country for many years between Home of Truth and Billings. Chuck's life was like a dang Jack Kerouac novel. I was just riding around, and it's true. I basically lived on the dang road and met a bunch of buckaroos, and for a long time was hanging around with some very religious Christian buckaroos, who I was really good friends with. And I would say, well, I don't really believe any of this stuff, but you know what? Tell me all about it. And they would have this was young age. They would have root beer keggers, and there's a root beer kegger in Camp Damascus, and all of this stuff that I have some very good friends in this, and I just thought, oh, that's so strange. And then now I have a pretty close bud who grew up in a cult. I don't want to, even though I'm anonymous, I don't want to give away what it was, but something that the Buckaroos have heard of. So I did a lot of interviewing with them to talk about Camp Damascus. Personally, my journey with queerness and neurodivergence is kind of strange in that I have not had that sort of trauma around my identity. I've kind of only had joy around it. As a bisexual buckaroo, pretty easy to hide that a lot, or to have it erased. A whole other topic that we could go into about bi erasure. Um, and also, as an autistic buckaroo, I'm very good at masking. You would actually never know really that I was autistic until you kind of got to know Chuck without this mask on. And so my whole life, these things about myself that are hard for others have actually always been a blessing. I love being autistic. My hyper focus helps me write. It has helped my life. I love being sexual. I love all these things. They bring me joy. And for years, I thought, well, I shouldn't talk about that or tell these stories because there are so many who that's a very serious, difficult thing for them. And what I realized was actually there does need to be a voice talking about the other side of it, and that all these stories are equal, and that a buckaroo coming out or getting diagnosed with autism, I would like them to say, oh well, there's a version of this that's actually pretty dang joyful as well, and that all our stories are different, and there's a variety of them. Sexuality is not a monolith, neither is autism. Because when I was younger, David Byrne did that to me. When I was diagnosed, I knew he was autistic, and I thought, wow, I just joined the cool kids club. It was never a bad thing. I was so excited. I thought it was so cool to be autistic. So I just kind of want to provide that to others. So yeah, my personal history is there is not a lot of trauma around those things. It is full of joy, and then I will also just in closing say, me having to grapple with that and come to terms with that is essentially what all of my next horror novel, Bury Your Gaze, is about. Actually, that's a philosophically speaking, that is entirely what that book is about. Is my struggles with that.
We just had one quick question. Claire B wanted to know, what is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, well, that's changed over time. I mean, everybody sees a dang T-Rex and they think, well, that's the coolest thing I've ever dang seen. Very handsome. Ever since writing Trans Wizard Harriet Horber and the Bad Boy Parasaurolophus, I just got to go with Snape, the Bad Boy Parasaurolophus. That's my number one because once you learn how to say it, it's very difficult. And once you can get it to just come out, you start to think that's a pretty dang cool dinosaur, pretty dang cool name.
That was the first time I've heard of that dinosaur was because of Harriet Porter. So I
Yes.
applaud you. Thank you. That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just have one, I guess it's not a question, but more of, will you say hello to Chris Pine for us?
Oh, I will. I'll give him, you know what? I'll give him a little. I'll give him a little wink and a nod. If let's say if our pals were to ever cross, I would say that. I've heard rumors bubbling online about that. I will just say that the film Pool Man is unfairly maligned, and I will also say that. That's my only comment on that.
Beautiful. I just had to ask. Well, I just want to say again, thank you so much for your time and congratulations. Camp Damascus is just exceptional in every way, and we're so excited we got to chat with you tonight.
Oh, it
Thank
was
you
wonderful.
so much.
Where can
Thank you
everyone
for
follow you? Where's the best place? Your website?
I'm doing Chuck Tingle pretty much everywhere on all the social medias. Twitter is collapsing into a fiery heap, but I've been enjoying Blue Sky and Tumblr. I am Dr. Chuck Tingle on Tumblr. I think I'm a real Chuck Tingle on TikTok, but I'm not too hard to find. My accounts will come up if you didn't search for Chuck. So I'll be there.
Beautiful. Well, again, have a great evening. Thank you so much for being here. And then for
Thank
everyone who's
you.
watching, we will be in touch with a recording link and we'll list out everything we talked about tonight because there was lots of great stuff. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your evening. And we'll
Thank you
see you
so much.
maybe in the future.
Yes, thank you. Love is real. Thank
Love
you
is
for
real.
Love is
coming.
real. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.